Okay, so we're now recording, and our discussion will be about an introduction to organic chemistry. Okay, so specifically, we're going to talk about the hybridization concept in the functional groups in organic chemistry. So, hybridization concept, you actually have an idea about this, right? Kasi you had your Vesper theory, 'di ba? Remember in Vesper theory, pag tetrahedral, ano ang kanyang hybridization? Kapag apat yung nakadikit sa kanya, lima, 'di ba? So you already have an idea about this. So this is just a review basically, okay? But in the context of organic chem. So with that, let us begin our introductory discussion. And by the way, next week we are all planning, no, lecture lab to. So we are all planning to make the discussions asynchronous para naman makapagpahinga kayo. And then in relation to the Holy Week, ay sorry, Holy Week tuloy. In relation to ano na rin, to Undas na. So yan. So November 1 and 2, yung 2 kasi may pasok na eh, but we want you to we want you to rest pa. Okay? Pero may papanoorin kaya. Okay? So, asynchronous discussion tayo next week. Okay? Lecture and lab asynchronous. Okay? So, anyway, so for the first part, we are going to have an info about the basics, no? Why do we need to study org chem, no? Bakit kailangan may ganito pa? And then, the historical context, of course. And bakit nga ba carbon ang inaaral sa organic chem? Okay? And what are the other things that you must remember prior to studying the entire org chem? Okay? So that will be our overview for this day. No? So let's have the definition. Let's take a look. Bakit siya different compared to other chem? Bakit siya iba sa gen chem? And the hybridization as well, and the functional groups. So again, this is just purely memorization and application of some concepts. Okay? So organic chemistry, basically when we say org chem, it is just the study of any compounds that contains carbon. So meaning it is not only limited to biological molecules. Kasi we know biological molecules are organic compounds. Na? Pag sinabing organic sa chemistry, we are pertaining to anything that contains carbon. So, ibig sabihin, hindi lang siya biomolecules nga. Ibig sabihin, pwede rin yung plastic. Kasi, plastic is made of carbon. Okay? So, ibig sabihin yung plastic, ano yan, organic yan. No? So, ibig sabihin, wag kayong magpapadali sa mga marketing strategies. No? Sa marketing kasi, basta sinabi organic, bibili na ng tao. Eh, organic din naman yung plastic, di ba? Ba't hindi nyo i-try? So, yun lang yung idea, no? So, kaya magpapadali sa mga marketing terms, no? Kasi when we say organic, it is very inclusive of any materials as long as it contains carbon. Okay? So, yan, that's organic chemistry. It will study the reasons why we have plastics, no? The reactions in forming plastics. Bakit tayo may nylon? Bakit may teflon sa ating mga non-stick frying pan, no? And most importantly, it will help us understand the reactions that happen inside our body, which results to many implications, no? Kunwari, kumain ka ng food, may chemical reactions diyan. So, org chem mag-explain nun. Okay? So, kunwari, kumain ka ng ano pa ba? Ng let's say yung sisig, no? So marami siyang fats, no? Bakit mas malakas siya in terms of energy compared to kanin lang, okay? So yan, ma-explain natin yan dito sa org chem and also eventually in biochem. Okay? So yan, as long as we have carbon, the right subject to understand it will be organic chemistry. Okay? And sometimes hindi lang carbon yung inaaral natin dito because organic compounds also contain other elements such as nitrogen, hydrogen, and oxygen. Okay? So if your organic compound contains only carbon and hydrogen, then we call it hydrocarbons, no? Okay, so hydrocarbons, yan yung mga alkanes, alkenes, alkynes, which you will discuss in your laboratory. Okay, so sometimes may nitrogen yan, oxygen. Ito na yung mga carbohydrates, no? Okay, so yan na yung mga carbohydrates, which is sugar. Okay, lagyan mo ng nitrogen yan, possible ang magawa natin ay, proteins, no? So, hindi lang naman limited tayo dito sa examples na to. Okay, but these are the most common example if you have the combination of these elements. Okay, and then sometimes we also have sulfur, no? Naglalagay din tayo ng sulfur, halogens, and phosphorus, no? Especially kunwari sa ating adenosine triphosphate, an organic molecule that is the energy carrier of the cell. Alam natin yan. At saan sila ginagawa? Sa metabolic processes, no? Glycolysis, Krebs cycle, electron transport chain, you will produce ATP. Okay? So, majority of the ATP is produced in the mitochondria. Okay? So, yan. So, may mga phosphorus din doon. So, organic molecules isn't just purely carbon. It can also contain other elements, no? Such as hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, selenium, halogens, so on and so forth. Okay? So, maraming pwedeng gawin dito sa OrgChem. Okay? So, ito uli yung tanong natin. Oh, it seems like para lang siyang Gen Chem, right? No, kasi parang ganun din yung mga elements sa mga inaral natin ng Gen Chem. So why do we even bother studying this, no? So bakit natin kailangan aralin to? Parang Gen Chem lang naman siya. So there are four primary reasons why organic chem is very important. Number one being is the historical context, okay? So or the historical perspective ng org chem. So did you know before, hindi sila naniniwala sa org chem because they have this theory in the early times called the vitalism. Sabi nila, in vitalism theory, na yung mga molecules that are found in living organisms such as plants, humans, no, they cannot be synthesized by men. Okay, ibig sabihin, nag-e-exist lang sila. Hindi natin sila kaya gawin. Okay? So that idea before, no, the vitalism theory dati, that's kind of restrictive, no, when it comes to knowledge forming. 'Di ba kung gusto mo mag-aral ng mga bagay-bagay, tas sinabi ng vitalism mo, hindi mo pwede gawin 'yan. Okay. So it's kind of restrictive, no. So that's why the progress of science before is really limited, no. And we cannot blame them because they don't have the knowledge yet, no. So ganun lang. So dati, they don't believe that you can create organic molecules unless that is made by biological systems such as plants, animals, no, humans. So ganun. Pero there was a chemist, no, German chemist, which is Friedrich Wöhler. Okay, so si Friedrich Wöhler, ang ginawa niya is that he was able to synthesize an organic molecule out of inorganic compounds. So ito yung mga inorganic, no? Yung mga salts natin. Pag sinabi salt, inorganic yun eh. So you have your ammonium chloride and silver cyanate. Pag pinagsama mo daw yan in the presence of heat, you will be forming urea, which is an organic molecule. Okay? So ang urea sa ating ihe, no, they are the byproducts of protein metabolism. Okay? So kapag na break down yung protein, it will produce urea. Okay? So anyway, so yan. Ano yung implication nito? Since Friedrich Wöhler was able to make organic compound out of inorganic compound, then that means that vitalism is wrong. Okay? Maling-mali ang vitalism. So since mali ang vitalism, it allowed people, no, especially scientists, no, chemists, to really develop uh, molecules that are similar with the biological molecules, no, so that they can study it, no. So nakita niyo yung ano, no, importance ng pag-debunk ng isang theory. Yung restrictive theory na yon, which is vitalism, pinipigilan niya yung mga tao to understand more. But when Friedrich Wöhler came up with this idea, nasira yung vitalism. Therefore, the possibilities for new learning is na-open siya. Na-open ang door into more discoveries, which led to what we have now. Alam na natin ngayon ang mechanisms ng virus, no? And creating vaccines, no? Lahat, alos alam na natin sa paligid natin. Bakit kapag kumain tayo ng food, we produce energy, no? So all of them, we were able to understand them thanks to Friedrich Wöhler. Kasi without Friedrich Wöhler, most likely, vitalism pa rin tayo. Ano kaya ginagawa natin now? Siguro ano pa rin tayo, mga cage people, ano, caveman. Hindi. Modern times na rin naman yan. Pero something like that. We are so, ano, siguro we are lagging behind. Siguro mababa pa rin mortality rate natin, no? Okay, so anyway. So, ganun lang yung importance ng ginawa ni Friedrich Wöhler. Okay? Kasi itong theory na to, vitalism, it restricted many knowledge formers, no? Mga scientists natin before. But thanks to Friedrich Wöhler, he defied the rules. He was able to create organic compound out of inorganic compounds, allowing research to be done uh, in the context of organic compounds. Ganun. So thanks to Friedrich Wöhler kasi without him, hindi natin alam kung ano nangyayari sa katawan natin ngayon siguro. Siguro nanguhula pa rin tayo. Kunwari, may sakit ka na. Ano kaya yan? Kulang ka lang sa ano, kulang ka lang sa tulog, mga ganon. Siguro ganon ang explanation natin. But now, with the help of OrgChem, we can explain many things na bakit ka may sakit. That's probably because of ganitong molecule pumasok sa body mo. May pathogen pumasok sa body mo, something like that. Okay? So as you can see, it's very important itong part ng history na to. Okay? So the next important thing about OrgChem, no, why do we need to study organic chemistry? Because interestingly, about 85% of all the compounds we know today are organic compounds, no? So ibig sabihin, vast majority of the molecules in the earth, no, are made of organic compounds. So imagine, no, without debunking vitalism, you will not discover that 85% of existing molecules around you. Okay? Hindi ko alam kung ano ginagawa natin kung hindi na debunk yung vitalism, no? Pero yun, since na-debunk siya, na-discover natin yung ibang mga molecules present around us. Okay? So, ano yung implication yan? No? So, nakagawa tayo ng drugs, no, that could help medicine. We were able to explain chemical reactions and apply it in real life. No? So, yun. So, ganun kalaking importance ng pag-aral ng OrgChem. No? Because majority of the molecules around you are organic compounds. Yung kahoy natin, no? So that's made of cellulose. Okay? Bakit hindi mo siya pwede kainin compared to the fruit of the plant? No? Biochem na yung magdi-discuss nun. Ito, plastic. Paano nagawa tong plastic na to? Organic chem reaction din yan. Okay? So, yan. Majority of the things around us are really organic compounds, even plastics. Okay. So, gaya nga na sinabi ko, hindi porket sinabing organic, it come from nature. Vitalism yan. Organic compounds can also be found in synthetic molecules such as plastic. Okay. And also, another thing, ayun nga, just as I said kanina pa, if you understand organic chem, you will understand biochem more. Okay, so it will be a vital key for you to understand biochemistry. Especially, most of you are biologist, no, in the future, and karamihan din magiging doctor. Okay? So alam ko, nag-pre-med kayo na talaga to be a doctor in the future. So in order for you to understand biological processes, you should have a good understanding of organic chem as well. Okay? So in biochemistry, we study carbohydrates, proteins, amino acids, and nucleic acids. So pag pinagsama-sama mo yung apat na yan, you can explain everything in your body. Okay? So you can explain the diseases that arise with the problems in carbohydrate synthesis or in protein synthesis, no? Yung mga linkeropathy syndromes, no? Yung mga ano deficiencies sa vitamins, no? Ano yung mga possible effect niya. So yan, so almost all can be explained well sa biochemistry as long as you understand your organic chemistry. Okay? So hindi lang siya eme-eme na subject, no? This is very important, no? Kailangan na kailangan to in order for you to explain biological processes. Especially, most of you are becoming doctors in the future. Na magiging doctor kayo. Don't worry. So yeah. So in order for you to explain to your patients all the things that are happening, you should understand the organic chemistry first. And lastly, there is a huge variety of organic compounds. Why? Because of its physical and chemical property. Okay? Ang inorganic compound kasi, they are just limited to salts. No? Salt, ibig sabihin, ionic compound. But when we say organic compound, it is primarily made of covalent compounds. And as you know, ang covalent compounds, it comes into many types. No? Some of them can only do dispersion forces, some of them are dipole, some of them can do hydrogen bonding. And yung implication nun is marami. Okay? Depending on the type of atoms you combine in an organic molecule, it could behave differently because of the type of chemical bonds it possesses. No? So, ganun ka-important yung pagkakaroon niya ng covalent bond na. Okay? So, having a covalent bond allowed OrgChem to be very diverse. Okay? Diverse in a sense na it can explain oil, mga mantika, gasoline. It can also explain proteins, protein folding, no? Something like that. It can explain bakit yung ating DNA ay double helix, no? Bakit yung RNA single helix lang? What's the connection between the double helix in the DNA? So yun, OrgChem bahala dun sa lahat ng yan. Okay? So by just having covalent bonds, yung OrgChem ay naging diverse. Okay? So yeah. So those are the things, yun yung mga reasons natin bakit important yung study ng OrgChem. Una, it debunked a major theory before. So by debunking that, it allowed us to discover more. Okay? Because almost everything around us are organic. And then, if you apply it in life systems, since biology kayo, yan, you can explain many things, no? And pag naging doctor kaya, this is very important, no? In diagnosing your patients, no? You look into the reasons why may sakit siya in a molecular level. So, biology and chemistry, pagsasamahin mo dun. Okay, so biochem yan. And then, of course, the diversity of organic molecules, which is mainly attributed to its type of chemical bond. Kasi ang inorganic, puro ionic lang yan, halos. Okay? So, nothing interesting masyado. But, in organic, ayan, masyadong maraming variety. Masyado siyang spicy. Okay? So, yan. So, now, punta tayo sa reason, bakit kaya carbon, no? Out of all the atoms in the periodic table, why carbon? Kasi apparently, on Earth, no, the abundant element here is carbon. Okay? So, abundant element is carbon. And next to it is oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen. Okay? So, carbon. So, ibig sabihin, lahat ng life form on Earth ang kaniyang backbone will be carbon. So, would it be possible that ibang element yung gagamitin sa ibang mundo siguro or in ibang universe? Possible. Okay? So, they are actually looking into the silicon-based life. Okay? So, they are, ano lang naman to, sci-fi, no? I think wala pa masyadong empirical data about this, no? Pero they are thinking that silicon-based life may exist, no? Kasi silicon is just below carbon. So, it will behave similarly. Okay? But on Earth, ang focus lang natin will be just carbon-containing compounds. Okay? So carbon, since it is abundant in nature, we call it the element of life. Na? Kasi nga, without carbon, all the molecules that is present in the body will not be possible. Yung ating mga cellulose, yung ating mga sugars from the fruits, no? Carbohydrates, they will all be impossible without carbon. Okay? So yan. So carbon, as you know it, it's in the fourth group in the periodic table, meaning it has both tendencies to give off and take in electrons. No? Remember our discussion in periodic table, nasa borderline si carbon. So it can lose 4 electrons or it can gain 4 electrons. Okay? So, however, the tendency of carbon is just to gain electrons because it's electronegative. Okay? It's non-metal. Okay, so meaning carbon can form 4 covalent bonds. Okay, 4 bonds. And then one thing with carbon is that if you connect them all together, you will be able to form huge chains, no? Chains, yung mga dugtong-dugtong ng molecules, polymers, no? Such as in plastics, no? So yung plastic natin, if you take a look at it in a molecular level, that is just carbon chain, no? Puro carbon lang yan na magkakadugtong. Okay, in our carbohydrates, that's also the case now. It is just a combination of sugar monomers, and due to it, carbon has this capacity or has this ability to form diverse compounds. Kasi pwede mo sila pagdugtong-dugtongin, walang limit sa pagdugtong-dugtong ng carbons, and you are also not limited to a single chain. Pwede mo sila ikut-ikutin, just as this molecule here. Okay? So, itong molecule na to, di ba nakapaikot yung carbons niyan. So, anyway, by the way, yung mga points dito sa hexagon na to, those are carbon. Okay? So, you will learn more on that sa lab. No? So, yan. So, walang limit kung paano mo pagdudugtongin yung carbon. So, ibig sabihin, you can have diverse molecules talaga. So, yan. So, you can apply OrgChem in drug development, no? Or just in production of foods, no? Production of raw materials, no? Such as plastics, no? So, yun. So, pero, bago tayo pumunta sa main topic ng chem, no? Or chem, let's take a look into this phrase muna, no? So, let's focus on this one. So, let's focus on this one. Diba sabi natin, carbon is in the fourth group in the periodic table, meaning it can form 4 bonds, no? Pero, meron siyang actually na parang inconsistency. Kasi, when you get its electron configuration, yung carbon, ano electron configuration ni carbon? Diba yan? So 1s2, 2s2, 2p2. So let's plot it in our molecular orbitals. So 1s2, 2s2, 2p2. Sabi natin, di ba yung carbon, it can form 4 bonds. But does it really? Tignan nyo. Ang idea kasi in molecular orbitals is that if the electron is not paired, it can form bonds. But look at this, no? Dalawa lang yung unpaired. Ibig sabihin, carbon should be only able to do 2 bonds lang. So, kailangan dalawa lang bonds ni carbon. But is that really the case? Ganyan ba talaga? Not really. Because in nature, we know that carbon is really tetravalent. Ibig sabihin, it can form 4 bonds. Why? Okay? Kasi, apparently, although ganito yung original na distribution ng electrons ni carbon, may ginagawa siyang something. We call it the hybridization. Okay? So when you say hybridization, the atom is just rearranging its electron in the orbitals. Okay? So in order to maximize its use. Okay? So apparently kasi, ito yung ground state ni carbon. But as you can see, dalawa lang yung pwede partneran na electron. So ibig sabihin dapat dalawang bonds lang meron yung carbon. But hindi ganun yung alam natin sa totoo buhay. Okay. So it's not really that. Apat yung bonds ni carbon. Ibig sabihin it must utilize all these electrons. How? So ganito yung ginagawa ni carbon. In hybridizing its orbitals, basically it just promotes one of its electron, especially the 2s electron. So, yung electron na yan, instead of being paired, sabi niya, maging single ka muna. No? Punta ka dun sa bakanting slot doon. Okay? So, ganun ginagawa ni carbon. So, it will be able to accommodate 4 bonds. Okay? So, yung pair ng electron dito sa 2s orbital, ipopromote niya para maging single electron in the p orbital. So, that will result into 4 unpaired electrons which are used in forming 4 bonds. Okay? So, yun. So, ganun yung ginagawa ni carbon. So, originally, it should only be able to do 2 bonds lang. However, due to the concept of hybridization, no, magiging 4 yung bonds niya. Okay? So, that explains bakit 4 yung ating bonds with carbon. Okay? So, ngayon, dito na nangyayari yung yung huge variety of organic molecules because dito sa 4 bonds na to, sa 4 lone electrons na to, okay, sa 4 unpaired electrons, dito sa electrons na to, hindi lahat yan gagamitin din ng carbon. Okay? So there may option siya to use all of them or to use few of them. Okay? Ang tawag doon ay hybridization nga. Okay? So nung pre-promote niya yung electron doon, lahat na sila single electrons na. Okay? Meaning they can accommodate other electrons from other atoms. Okay? Pero carbon has the freedom to either use all of them or not. Okay? So that explains bakit tayo may iba't ibang bonds sa carbon. Bakit may mga single bond, double bond, triple bond. Okay? So let's explain that. Okay? So yan, ang concept ng hybridization is that yung 4 electrons na bakante, okay, pwedeng gamitin niya lahat yan or not. Okay? So let's talk about the sp3 hybridization. Okay? So sp3 hybridization happens when carbon chooses to use all the 4 electrons in the second orbit. Okay? Diba ginawa niyang single lahat? Tapos pag ginamit niya lahat yan, the hybridization of carbon will be sp3, meaning it can form 4 bonds. Okay? Kasi gagamitin niya lahat yan eh. So 4 bonds yung kaya niya gawin. According to Vesper theory, if your atom is capable of forming 4 bonds, ibig sabihin, it will have a tetrahedral geometry and the bond angle will be 109.5 degrees. Okay? So, ito yung ating 4 bonds na carbon. It is tetrahedral and the angle between these bonds is 109.5. Okay? Yan. So, ganito yung magiging itsura ng carbon mo. And, ayan. So, yan yung sp3 hybridization. When carbon chooses to use all the 4 electrons na nasa second orbit niya. Okay? So, that's sp3 hybridization. Ngayon, so, may option din si carbon not to use all of them, just as I said. What if out of the 4 electrons you have here, 3 lang gamitin niya? Okay? Ibig sabihin yung isa hindi niya gagamitin. So, ano mangyayari? So, it will not be sp3 hybridized orbital. It will be sp2 hybridized orbital. Okay? So remember, apat yon originally. Apat yung electrons na possible for bonding. Pero if carbon chooses not to use all of them, pwede naman. So, suppose it wants to use 3 out of the 4 orbitals kanina. So, ang magiging hybridization niya will be called sp2 hybridization. Isang S, dalawang P. Yung isang bakanteng P, saan niya gagamitin? Mamaya, pakita natin. So anyway, so anong implication when we have sp3 hybridization? It will be able to bond with 3 atoms. So if you have bonds with 3 atoms, according to Vesper theory, ano yung geometry mo? Trigonal planar, and the bond angle will be 120 degrees. Okay? So magiging flat yung molecule mo. Okay? So, ito yung question. Saan niya gagamitin to? Okay. Saan niya gagamitin yung electron na hindi natin ginamit? Okay? So, it will be used to create double bonds. Okay? So, that's why if you have an sp2 hybridized orbital, you will see double bonds. Okay? So, for example, in this picture here, carbon is bonded to 3 different atoms. Okay? So, 3 different atom meaning sp2 hybridized yan. So, sa tingin nyo, uli, saan gagamitin yung hindi ginamit na electron? It will be used in forming double bonds. Okay? So, yun. So, whenever you see double bond, that means the hybridization of carbon is sp2. It utilized 3 out of 4 orbitals. Yung hindi ginamit, saan siya nilagay? Sa double bond. Okay? So, ganun lang. So, compare mo yan sa single bond lahat, no? So, kapag single bond lahat, sp3 hybridized orbital, tetrahedral yan. Pero kung tatlo lang gamitin niya dyan, it will be trigonal planar, sp2 hybridized. Okay? And then, magkakaroon na siya ng double bond. Okay? And then, lastly, we have the sp hybridized orbital. So, di ba, apat yon? What if it chooses to use 2 lang? Pwede yon. Okay? So, meaning, carbon will be bonded to 2 atoms lang. Okay? So, it will be bonded to 2 atoms. Okay? So, ano yung implication yan? So, if your atom is bonded to 2 atoms, you will have a linear geometry with a bond angle of 180 degrees. So, ano kaya gagawin dito sa dalawang unused electrons? So, those 2 unused electrons will be used to create 2 more bonds. No? So, basically, dito tayo magkakaroon ng triple bonds. Okay? So, ganun lang. Kapag isa yung unused, double bond. Pag dalawa yung unused, triple bond. So, one good example of this will be your acetylene. Ito yung mga nasa blowtorch. So, as you can see, let's look at this bond here. No? So, carbon is bonded to 2 atoms lang. Hydrogen and carbon. So, ibig sabihin, ito yon, yung bond to hydrogen to carbon. Yan yun. So, saan nyo ginamit yung dalawang unused electron? It will be used to create the triple bond. Okay? So, syempre, bawal kay hydrogen. Edi between carbon and carbon yan. Okay? So, yun yung triple bond na. Yung isa dyan, ito. Yung isa dyan, ito. Tapos, itong dalawang extra bonds, ito yun. Okay? Ito yun. So, whenever you see a triple bond, meaning, ang kanyang hybridization ay sp and linear yan. Kapag may double bond ka nakita, ibig sabihin, the hybridization is sp2. Okay? And kapag puro single bond yan, that is sp3. Okay? Ganun lang naman. So, carbon has the freedom naman to choose whether to use all the 4 electrons or not. Okay? When carbon chooses to use all of them, sp3 siya. If 3 of them, sp2. Pag dalawa lang, sp. Pag isa, walang ganun. Okay? So, yan. So now, let us try to answer these problems, I will draw the molecule because I assume na hindi nyo pa alam for now mag-drawing ng molecules. So, let me draw the urea. Okay? And you need to tell me the hybridization and the geometry of the atom, the carbon and nitrogen atom. Okay, so paano to? So ganito lang, no? So this is urea. This is one of the components in the urine, which is a byproduct of protein metabolism. Okay? So, ito yung na-synthesize din ni Friedrich Wöhler. Okay? So, ito yung tanong. What's the hybridization of the carbon and nitrogen atom here? So, just use the concept that we had earlier, no? Pag may nakita kang double bond, yun ay sp2. Pag puro single bond, sp3. Pag may triple bond, sp hybridized orbital lang yan. So, tulungan niyo ako. What is the hybridization of this carbon? So, what's the hybridization of the carbon? Yan ay, sige, you can chat sa chat box natin. Asan yung mouse ko? Ito. So, what's the hybridization of carbon kaya? Okay. So, it is sp2. Yeah. So, you're all correct. sp2 yan. As you can see, yun, may double bond. Ayan. And also, the atom is bonded to 3 atoms lang. The central atom is bonded to 3 atoms. Isa, dalawa, tatlo. So, ganun. It is bonded to 3 atoms lang. Okay. So, ibig sabihin, out of the 4 electrons, tatlo lang ginamit niya, and the other one is used as a double bond. So, tama kayo. So, ibig sabihin, if this is sp2, what's the geometry around this carbon? Is it tetrahedral, trigonal planar, or linear? It will be trigonal planar. So as long as you have an sp2 hybridized orbital, you have a trigonal planar geometry. Ibig sabihin, this molecule is flat. Itong part na to, flat triangle yan. Okay? Flat yan. So malaki yung importance ng flatness na yan. No? Kasi when you do your reactions sa laboratory, pag nag-discussion na kayo sa reaction, malalaman nyo, yung pagiging flat nito will result in many things. No? So ano yun? Di ko na muna sasabihin. Kasi matagal pa naman to. Okay? So yung flatness na yan, that can help the molecule to react more. Okay? So anyway, basta ang idea, flat yan dito. Flat triangle yan. Okay? So how about nitrogen atom? Wala. So you can use the similar concept with carbon. Okay? Parehas lang din ang concept, no? So bilangin mo lang ilan yung nakapalibot sa kanya. By the way, nitrogen usually consists of lone pair, di ba? May lone pair talaga siya. So you consider that, no, as an atom. Pag may nakita kayong lone pair around the atom, kunwari carbon, kunwari may nakita kayong ganyan, consider that as an atom. Okay? So kunwari, ito. Ano yung hybridization ng atom na to? Let's say carbon yan. So, kunwari may tatlong atom doon. May lone pair sa carbon. So, ano yung hybridization niya? So, baka isipin nyo, ay, tatlo po kasi sp lang. Kasi tatlo yung sp2. Kasi tatlo yung nakakabit na atom sa kanya. But consider mo yung lone pair as an atom din. So, magpa-plus 1 ka. So, it is now sp3. Okay? So, whenever you see a lone pair, consider it as an atom. Okay? So, yan. So, ito, hindi siya sp2. Kasi, baka sabihin nyo, tatlo po kasi yung atoms around it. So, sp2. No. Because of the lone pair, No, we treat lone pair as an atom. So it's not sp2 lang, it's sp3. So tatlo yung nakadugtong sa kanya, including the lone pair. Okay? So kung sa Lewis structure, kinakalimutan natin yung lone pair in organic chem, they are very important, no? So ganun din kay nitrogen, no? Just like carbon, we can do that kay nitrogen. Whenever you see lone pair, consider it as an atom. So ilan yung nakapalibot kay nitrogen? So isang hydrogen, dalawa, tatlo, and apat, including the lone pair. Okay? So ganun gagawin niya. Whenever you have a lone pair, consider it as an atom. So apat yung nakapalibot kay nitrogen. Dalawang hydrogen, isang carbon here, and the lone pair. So apat yung nakabond sa kanya. So ano yung hybridization? Kapag apat yung nakabond, edi ano? Ano yung hybridization? Kapag apat yung nakabond, yun ay sp3. Okay? Ito yun, no? So, kapag sp3, gagamitin yung apat to form 4 single bonds. Okay? So, yan. So, we can apply that to nitrogen as well. Okay? So, sp3 yan kasi it is bonded to 4 groups. Tatlong atom, isang lone pair. Okay? So, what do you think is the geometry of this group here? Of this atom? What's the geometry of this atom? Since it is sp3, it is what? It is tetrahedral. Okay? So as long as you have sp3, kahit anong atoms yan, tetrahedral yan. Okay? Pag sp2, trig-planar yan. Okay? So kahit anong mangyari, kahit anong atom yan, as long as it is sp3, it is always tetrahedral. Okay? That's according to your Vesper theory in the lab. Na? So yan. So ganun lang. So tetrahedral agad yan. So meaning, this nitrogen here is also sp3. Bakit siya naging sp3? Because it is bonded to 4 different groups. Carbon dito, hydrogen doon, and the lone pair. Again, as always, consider lone pair as an atom. Kung dati kinakalimutan natin siya, ngayon, important na siya. Okay? So consider nitrogen as, consider lone pair as an atom. So ibig sabihin, apat yung nakabond to nitrogen. Meaning, if you have 4 bonds around it, it's sp3. And it will have a geometry of trigonal planar. So in 3D, hindi yan flat, no? Itong part lang yung flat. Pero itong nitrogens dito, ano yan, tetrahedral. So let me draw kung ano magiging representation niya kapag naka 3D tayo. Okay? So itong part na to, this is flat. While this one is 3D. Okay? So ganun. Sorry, I don't have... I'm looking for my molecular models. Meron kasi ako yung mga bilog-bilog na dinudugtong. Pero hindi ko alam kung saan ko siya nalagay. So, hahalugugin ko mamaya yung bahay. Okay. Pero yun, dun natin makikita that this part of the molecule is indeed flat. Flat yan. But the sides, ito at ito, siya ay naka 3D. Okay. Because of its sp3 hybridization. Okay. Kasi tetrahedral siya. So, ganun yung magiging itsura niyan. Okay? So, again, siguro in the following meetings, no, makikita nyo na ako na ginagamit ko yung molecular models ko. Kasi hindi ko alam kung saan ko nalagay. Anyway, let's try this one, acetylene. Na-drawing ko na to kanina eh. So, acetylene, let's determine the hybridization and the geometry of the carbon atom. So, ito yung carbon atom, ito yung carbon atom. So, let's focus on this muna. No? So, as you can see, your carbon is bonded to 2 atoms, the hydrogen and the carbon. Okay? So, ano hybridization yan? What's the hybridization of this central carbon here? Siya ay sp. Yeah, this is sp. sp lang siya because it is bonded to just 2 atoms, and the most obvious reason bakit siya sp is kasi may triple bond siya. Ayan. Okay. So, yan. So, may triple bond siya. So, it is sp hybridized na. Okay? Ito rin. If you look at this atom here, it is sp. And so, yan, kasi it's just bonded to 2 atoms, and the other extra electrons are used to create the triple bonds. Okay? So, pareho silang sp, meaning it is linear, flat yung molecule na yan, and the bond angle here is 180 degrees. So, flat talaga yan. Okay? So, yan. Siguro hanapin ko na lang talaga yung molecular models ko. Kasi maganda sana yan. Pero anyway, kung nanonood kayo ng lab videos ko, ayun, doon ko magagamit ng matindi yung models ko. Okay. So anyway, ganun lang. So again, keep in mind that for every type of hybridization of your carbon, you will have different geometries, and that results in different bond angles. So, ganun lang. So, pag sp3, that's tetrahedral, and the angle is 109.5. sp2, ibig sabihin, trigonal planar, the angle is 120 degrees, it's trigonal planar, and sp, meaning it is linear, it has a bond angle of 180 degrees. Ayan. So, we have a question. Sir, yung electron geometry po yung sinusunod dito. Yes. Diba remember, you have the electron geometry and the molecular geometry. Okay. So, ang susundin natin is the electron geometry. So, in electron geometry, you also consider lone pairs. So, ganun ka-important yan. Kasi baka sabihin nyo, bent po. Okay. And we're not really focused on that. Hindi tayo nagfo-focus sa molecular geometry. What we are more concerned with is the electron geometry. So, ganun. So, yung overall, including the lone pairs. Yeah. So, yan. At least, alam ko na, alam mo pa yung Vesper theory. Okay. Andun yun, di ba? Electron geometry, molecular geometry. So, yeah, you are correct. Okay. So, yan. So, ibig sabihin yan, our organic molecules are three-dimensional at times. Nalilito. Ano lang, yung ano lang, ano ba yung basta in organic chem, ito lang naman yung gagamitin natin. So, hindi na tayo katulad ng sa inorg chem natin na may octahedral, di ba may ganun tayo. Geometry, electron geometry, octahedral, and then yung molecular geometry. Pwede siya maging square planar, square pyramidal. No? Hindi na tayo magaganon. So, we are just limited to 3 lang. Trigonal planar, tetrahedral, and linear. So, yun lang yung mga pinagpipilian talaga in org chem. Okay? So, huwag na tayo mag-focus sa mga seesaw, distorted seesaw, something like that. Hindi na ganun. Okay? So, org chem is much easier when it comes to geometries kasi paulit-ulit lang siya. Okay? So, ang implication nito is that our molecules are 3D. No? So, naka 3D yung ating molecules, especially those who will do tetrahedral geometry. So, kaya yung ating mga proteins, naka 3 dimension yan. Our body is 3D. Naka 3D yung ating katawan kasi nga 3D yung molecules within us. No? So, imagine if puro trigonal planar tayo. No? Siguro flat tayo. But that's not the case. No? Ano tayo? 3D. Okay? So, yun. 3D tayo. So, yan yung reason bakit yung mga molecules ay three-dimension due to the hybridization of atoms. So, let me show you this thing here. So, this is the spike protein of COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2. So, naka 3D yung kanyang structure. So, let's look at this. No? At ito, tinuturo ko sa biochem ko to, kung paano gumamit na itong website na to. Okay. So, let us wait for it to load lang. So, ang reason bakit 3D yung nasa paligid natin, kasi yung mga carbon atom, especially if that's tetrahedral, naka 3D siya. So, this is the spike protein of COVID-19. Ayan na, spike siya. So, ito yung kumakabit sa ating mga receptor sa cell. Pag kumabit yan sa receptor ng cell, then ayun. If you take a look into the singlest unit dito, mag-zoom in lang tayo. Atoms lang yan na naka 3D. Okay. So, yung pagiging 3D ng ating mga atoms here, that results in 3D molecules. Okay. Galing na. So, ito yung nasa COVID na. Ito yung dinedetect ng RT-PCR. Okay. Ayan. So, yan. Yan yung dahilan bakit naka 3D tayo. Kasi, yung ating mga molecules, organic molecules, majority of them ay tetrahedral in geometry. So, 3D sila. Okay? So, yan. So, again, just to emphasize, dun sa 82%, 85% of known organic molecules, okay, that corresponds to 10 million molecules, and apparently, every year, nadadagdagan yan by 10,000. Maraming pa tayong dinidiscover na organic molecules, especially to those na nakikita sa plants. No? Ang tawag doon sa study na yon ay natural products. No? So yan, sa natural products, ito natin inaalam yung mga molecules na hindi pa natin nadidiscover and their possible application, especially in medicine. Okay? So itong 10 million molecules na to, may iba-iba silang physical property, may iba-iba silang chemical property due to the different hybridization of carbon atoms. No? So iba yung chemical property ni sp3 hybridized carbon, iba yung chemical property ni sp2 hybridized carbon, iba yung property ni sp hybridized carbon. Okay, so for every hybridization, there will be a corresponding property. Okay, so that's why yung first lecture ninyo sa laboratory is about alkanes, alkenes, alkynes. No? So dun yung makikita yung difference ng reactivity ng ating mga molecules. Okay? So now, tapos na tayo sa concept ng OrgChem. So ganun lang yan. Kabisaduhin nyo lang yung hybridization. Ilang atoms yung pwede kumabit sa kanya. Ano yung mga geometry niya. Okay? So just remember all those things. Again, unlike the Vesper theory na ang dami nating ginagawa, dito sa OrgChem, we are just limited to 3 geometries. Trigonal, planar, tetrahedral, linear. So, dun lang tayo. Kasi dati, napupunta pa tayo sa mga siso, T-shape, no? Octahedral, square, pyramidal. No? We will not do that anymore. Okay? So, it's too complicated. No? So, yan. So, mas madali buhay sa OrgChem. Just memorize the 3 hybridizations and the 3 geometries. Okay? So, yan. So, ganun lang. And now, let's focus on the last part of this discussion, which is on the functional groups. Okay. So, functional groups, these are group of atom in organic chemistry that act as one. Okay. So, ang OrgChem kasi, we classify the molecules based on the functional groups. No? So, kaya tayo merong mga alkane, alkene, alkyne, tawag doon hydrocarbon, meron tayong mga ketones, aldehydes, yan, carboxylic acid. So all of them are functional groups. No? So they are just group of atoms that act as one. Okay. So having different functional groups results in different chemical properties. No? So ibig sabihin, kapag yan ay may ketone, may aldehyde, Yan, may iba pa siyang chemical property than let's say amine, no? So something like that. So later makikita natin yung mga functional groups and how to recognize them. So this part of OrChem is just purely memorization lang. Okay? So memorize lang tayo. Okay, so let's talk about the functional groups again. So they are just combination of atoms that act as one, and organic molecules have this. Okay, so you just need to memorize them. So ito yung mga ating functional groups. So common functional groups in OrChem, and we will discuss all of them until December. So we have your alcohols, your amines, aldehyde ketones, carboxylic acid, ester, and amide. Okay. So next chapter natin, we will cover alcohols. Next chapter, we will cover this too. Sa ating ninth chapter, ito naman. And then for the 10th chapter, ito. Okay. So, i-discuss natin lahat yan eventually. Okay. So, but for now, let us check what is the common group of atoms that can be found for these families, for these functional groups now. So, let's begin with alcohol. Alcohol has a functional group of OH. No? OH. Para siyang base, no? May hydroxyl functional group siya. So whenever you have the hydroxyl functional group, it is an alcohol. But unlike bases, hindi to basic, no? Neutral yan, okay? So 'di ba, alam nyo kapag OH base, kapag H plus acid. So sa OrChem hindi ganun, okay? Basta may OH dyan, that is just an alcohol which is neutral. Okay? So, yan. Ibig sabihin, basta may word na alcohol, it contains an OH. Okay? So, for example, your isopropyl alcohol, its drawing is this one. Ganito yung itsura ng inyong isopropyl alcohol. Malalaman nyo kung paano mag-draw na ito sa laboratory. Okay? So, this is isopropyl alcohol which is in your mga disinfectant sa bahay. So as you can see, you have your OH atoms joined together, okay, and it is connected to those molecule. So as long as you see this, that's automatically an alcohol, okay? So yan, alcohol yan. Pag may nakita naman kayong NH2, you call it an amine, okay? So for example, in amino acids, no, may amine doon, kaya nga siya amino acid. Okay, so let me just draw it. So this is glycine, the simplest amino acid. Ayan. So nakikita nyo, ayun, no? May NH2. Ibig sabihin, amine yan. Yung part na yan ay amine. Kaya nga amino acid eh. Amine acid. Ito yung acid. Okay? So yun yung amine sa amino acid. Okay, basta may makita kang NH2. Yan, amino acid. Ay, amine yan. Amine. Okay? What else? Aldehydes, no? Aldehydes, mababango yan. Okay? Ito yung favorite ko na aldehyde. This is benzaldehyde. So, yan. As long as you have this group here, C double bond OH, that's an aldehyde. We call this thing here, itong C double bond O, we call it the carbonyl. Okay? And if your carbonyl contains hydrogen, it's an aldehyde. Okay? If it contains hydrogen, yung carbonyl mo may hydrogen, it's an aldehyde. What if palitan mo yan ng carbon? Pag carbon yung nakapaligid sa carbonyl, it's a ketone. Okay? So, meaning ng lines dun sa gilid, carbon yan. Kapag bakante yung line dun sa gilid, carbon yan. Okay? So, as you can see here, kapag aldehyde, there should be a hydrogen connected to the carbonyl. Okay? However, if there's no hydrogen connected to the carbonyl, then that's a ketone. Puro carbon nasa paligid niya. Ketone yan. So, nakikita yung ketone sa acetone. Okay? Yung acetone, panglinis ng kuko. Okay, yung mga cutics. Yan, ketone yun. Kaya nga acetone tawag doon. Okay? Pero kapag palitan mo yung carbonyl group, so 'di ba kita nyo, pag hydrogen, aldehyde, pag carbons, ketone. Pag pinalitan mo ng OH yung nakatabi kay carbonyl, it is now called carboxylic acid. Ano yung carboxylic acid? Ito yung mga nasa vinegar, okay? Nasa suka. Okay? So, in our vinegar, that's acetic acid. Ayan. So, ang carbonyl, nakadugtong lang siya sa OH. Okay? Ano pa pwede natin modification sa carbonyl? Pwede natin palitan yan. Instead of having hydrogen, we can connect carbon there. Tawag doon ay ester. Okay? So, as you can see, no, pagpalit-palitin mo lang yung atoms, nagbabago yung functional group. So, kapag OH yon, this is carboxylic acid. Pero palitan mo yun ng carbon, it is now an ester. Okay? So, pag dugtong-dugtongin mo carbon doon, ester yan. Okay? And then lastly, instead of carbon, palitan mo ng nitrogen. That's called, instead of OH, palitan mo ng nitrogen. That's called an amide. Okay? So, ayun lang. As you can see, may may commonality sila. Especially the carbonyl. Ano na lang gagawin mo sa carbonyl? Palitan mo yung atoms around it. If it contains hydrogen, then that's aldehyde. If puro carbon lang yun nasa paligid ni carbonyl, that's ketone. If may OH sa tabi ni carbonyl, then that's carboxylic acid. If yung H palitan mo ng carbon, that's an ester. Oh, by the way, pag nakakita kayo ng R, it's carbon. Okay. So, yan. So, pag yung H palitan mo ng carbon, ester na yan. And kapag amine yung nilagay mo sa carbonyl, that's called an amide. Okay? So, yan. Just remember those patterns, no? That the combination of different atom may result in different functional groups. Okay? So, may pattern naman yan. All you need to do is to just remember those patterns. Okay? So, pag OH lang, alcohol. Pero kapag may carbonyl, tas may OH, yun ay carboxylic acid. Kapag NH3 lang or NH2, amine yan. Pero kapag may carbonyl yan, that's amide. Okay? Again, yung carbonyl yun, C double bond O yan. Okay? So, ganun lang. Makikita nyo yung difference na. And then, in the context of this 4 here, yung carbonyl, dugtungan mo ng hydrogen, aldehyde yan. Pag carbon, ketone. Pag may OH, carboxylic acid. Kapag yung H, palitan mo ng carbon, again, that's an ester. Okay? So, ganun lang. So, all you have to do is to just recognize patterns. Okay? So now, let's talk about this, no? Very quickly lang, pero i-discuss pa natin to uli in the future lessons. Okay, for alcohols, no? Yung alcohols natin, it comes in 3 different forms then. It could be a primary, secondary, or tertiary alcohol. So how will you know if an alcohol is a primary, secondary, or tertiary alcohol? So ganito yung technique. Bilangin mo ilang carbon yung nakadugtong sa carbon na dinudugtungan ng OH. Okay. Paano yun? Di ba ito yung OH, yung alcohol mo. Tignan mo ilang carbon yung nakadugtong, kung saan siya nakadugtong. Di ba itong OH na to, it's connected to this carbon. Now, count how many carbon is attached to this. If isa lang, that's a primary. Pero, kung dalawa, that's a secondary. And if tatlo yan, that's a tertiary alcohol. Okay? So, yun yung medyo confusing at first na. Pero again, in order for you to classify your alcohol, you need to look into how many carbons are attached to the carbon to which it is attached. Okay. Tignan mo gaano karaming carbon yung nakadugtong sa dinudugtungan niya. Pag isa lang, primary yan. Pag dalawa, secondary. Pag tatlo, tertiary. Okay? So we indicate primary with 1 and the degree symbol. So that's primary. This is secondary. This is tertiary. Okay? So ganun lang. So baka ma-confuse kayo at first pero eventually ma-absorb nyo rin yan. Just count how many carbons ang nakadugtong sa carbon na dinudugtungan ni OH. So that will help you determine the type of alcohol you have. We have amine. Okay. So ang amine naman, similar with alcohol lang. It can be classified into 3, a primary, secondary, and a tertiary amine. But this time, yung carbon, it is directly attached to the nitrogen. So unlike kay OH dito, na naka-attach yung carbons to the carbon, dito, naka-attach siya directly to nitrogen. So as you can see here, if isa yung carbon that is connected to the nitrogen, it's a primary amine. Pag dalawa, yung carbons na nakatugtong kay nitrogen, that's a secondary. And if tatlo yung nakadugtong sa kanya, it's tertiary. So yun lang yung subtle difference. They are similar in terms of the primary, secondary, and tertiary classifications. But yung carbon for amine, it is directly connected to the nitrogen. Unlike in alcohols, na hindi siya directly nakakonect kay oxygen. Sa dinudugtungan ni oxygen siya nakadugtong. Okay? So yun, just count the carbons around that na. And that will help you what type of amine you have there. Aldehyde and ketone, as I said, it contains a carbonyl group. Ito yan, C double bond O. And depending kung ano yung nakadugtong sa carbonyl, then that could be an aldehyde or a ketone. Pag may hydrogen na nakadugtog kay carbonyl, that's an aldehyde. However, if you have carbons at both sides of the carbonyl, then that's a ketone. Just remember that. Carboxylic acid, ito yung carbonyl na may OH. No? Okay, it is a carbonyl na may OH. Okay? So, kaya nga carboxylic yan. No? Hydroxyl. Yung oxyl na yan, hydroxyl yan. Carbo meaning carbonyl. So, it is a carbonyl with hydroxyl group. Okay? So, pinagsamang ketone na alcohol. Okay? So, this is the carboxylic acid. If you replace the carboxylic acid, no, yung hydrogen doon, palitan mo ng carbon, yun ay ester. Okay? So, ester yan. Palitan mo yun ng, yung OH, palitan mo ng nitrogen, that's amide. Okay? And just like amine, the amides can be classified as a primary, secondary, and tertiary as well. Just count the number of carbons connected to the nitrogen. So in this case, isa yung carbon connected to the nitrogen. So that's a primary. In this case, dalawa yung carbons near the nitrogen. So that's a secondary. And kapag tatlo yan, that's a tertiary amide. Okay? So ganun lang. Let me draw this Lewis structure para mas makita niya. So you just have to remember all these things lang. Na? So yun yung kagandahan ni OrgChem. Basta kabisado nyo, buhay kayo. Okay? So yan. So as you can see, this is amine. And may isang carbon na nakadugtong sa kanya. So that is a primary. However, sorry, mali pala. Yan. So ito yung carbon na yon. So this amine is connected to just one carbon. So it's a primary. However, since the amine is also connected to the carbonyl, that's called an amide. Na? So amide siya. It's a primary amide. Pag may isa pang nakadugtong na carbon dyan, that's a secondary. So ito yung isang carbon, ito yung pangalawa. And kapag tatlo yung nakadugtong sa kanya, that's tertiary. Okay? So ganun lang. It's very analogous with the amine. But as long as it is connected to the carbonyl, then amide tawag doon. Okay? So pag may nakita kayong carbonyl next to the nitrogen, that's amide. Okay? So with that, let's try this. So ako muna dito, and then later may ipapasagot ako sa inyo. Okay? So, ganito lang na. Kailangan kabisado nyo yung mga patterns. Okay, kailangan kabisado nyo yung mga patterns na yan. And, ayan. I will identify the functional groups present in these molecules. Okay? So, ganito, paano magsagot na. So, tignan nyo yung gagawin ko. So, for number 1, we have this molecule. May kapapansin nyo, you have your C double bond O. That's a carbonyl. Okay? Carbonyl yan. So, it contains a carbonyl. And then may oxygen sa right. Okay. So, it could either be a carboxylic or pwede rin siyang maging ester. Okay? Yan na. So, if you have a carbonyl na may oxygen sa right side, it could either be a carboxylic or an ester. Okay? So, kailangan kabisado nyo talaga to. And anyway, pwede naman kayo magkodigo. Okay? So, yan. So, may carbonyl, may oxygen. So, it's either of the two. But look at what's next sa oxygen. Kapag carboxylic yan, ang kasunod dapat ay hydrogen. But, that's not the case. Ano yung kadugtong ni oxygen? Carbon. And sabi ko, di ba kanina, kapag carbon yung nakadugtong doon, ester yan. So, this is not a carboxylic acid. Rather, this is an ester. Okay? So, that's how you deduce the functional groups out of your molecules. No? So, you really need to recognize patterns. No? How about number 2? This is carbon, yung itim, yung red, oxygen, and then yung white is hydrogen. So, this is carbonyl. Okay, carbonyl yan. And next to it, you have your oxygen. So, either ester yan or carboxylic acid. So, ito na naman yung options natin. So, tignan mo kung ano nakadugtong kay oxygen. If that's carbon, then that's an ester. If that's hydrogen, then that's carboxylic. So, ano ba yung nakadugtong sa kanya? Hydrogen. So, that means this one is carboxylic acid yan. Okay? So, ganun mag-pattern recognition sa OrgChem. Pag nakita nyo yung carbonyl, look at what's next to it. Okay? Tignan mo yung nakadugtong sa kanya sa gilid. Number 3, we have this thing. Ano kaya to? NH2 lang yung nakadugtong. So, ano meaning nun? Kapag NH2 lang, walang carbonyl. So, this is amine. So, this is amine. Kapag may carbonyl, amide. Ayan. Ito yung amide. Pero kapag amine lang, ito lang. Wala siyang carbonyl. Wala tayong carbonyl. Walang oxygen eh. So, this is just amine. Ayan. So, anong type ng amine kaya to? Is it primary, secondary, tertiary? So, gagawin mo, tignan mo, ilan yung carbon na nakadugtong kay nitrogen? Isa lang. O yun, no? Nakaline na nga eh. Ibig sabihin, is a primary amine. Okay? So, ganun lang. And then lastly, this one, I have a carbonyl again. May carbonyl ako. And then, look at what's next. Hydrogen. So, if you have a carbonyl and a hydrogen, ano tawag doon? Yun ay aldehyde. Okay? So, just remember those patterns now. Okay? So, ganun lang ang pag-identify ng functional groups. Okay? Pag OH lang, that's alcohol. Pag NH2 lang, amine yan. Kapag may carbonyl, maraming options. You can have an aldehyde pag hydrogen nakadugtong sa carbonyl. You can have a ketone if parehas carbon na sa paligid niya. Carboxylic acid if yung carbonyl may OH. Ester kapag yung H ng carboxylic acid, palitan mo ng carbon. Amide if yung carbonyl merong amine. Okay? So, yan. Ayan, yun lahat na. So, ganun lang. So, that's how you identify the functional groups. Okay? So, for now, it is very important na kabisaduhin nyo muna to. And that ends our discussion. So, tapos na yung ating discussion. But before we dismiss the class, may onting activity ako. So, hindi to graded. Siyempre, hindi naman ako nagpaparecite. Alam niyo naman, kusang loob lang yung recitation natin. Kasi pag nagtawag ako, maglilib kayo ng chat. Ayan. So, ayan. So, I have several molecules here. And I want you to identify the functional groups that can be observed here. So, let's begin with glycine. So, glycine is an amino acid. This is the simplest amino acid. So, there are two functional groups here. So, I want you to identify ano yun. Okay? Sige. Ano yung functional groups na meron kay amino acid na to? Sabi ko na yung isa. Glycine. Dalawa yon. Okay? Anyone? Anong functional groups meron dito? Okay? We have a carboxylic acid and a primary amine. Okay, so yan. So, asan yung carboxylic acid? Ito, oh. You have a carbonyl na may OH. Okay? So, carboxylic acid yan. Okay, basta yung OH mo may carbonyl carboxylic acid. And then the amine here, ito yon. This is your amine. And yeah, Angelica's correct. This is a primary amine. Paano mo masasabi na primary amine yan? Just look to which carbon or ilang carbon siya nakadugtong. So this nitrogen is connected to just this carbon. Isa lang. So kapag isa lang, primary. Paano pag dalawa? Secondary. Paano pag tatlo? Tertiary. Paano po pag apat? Pwede ba yun? Pwede. Pero hindi na yung common. Okay? So that's a quaternary amine. You will learn that in biochem na lang. Okay? So that's glycine. So we have a primary amine here and a carboxylic acid. So kaya amino acid tawag sa kanila. You have your amino and the acid na yun. So, yun yung amino acids. You have the amine and the carboxylic acid. Next one, another amino acid is the proline. Proline is the weirdest of all the amino acid kasi ganyan yung itsura niya. Okay, so ano yung functional groups present in proline? By the way, pangit sulat ko doon. So that's hydrogen. So what are the functional groups present in proline? Of course, you have your carboxylic. And then, what else? What else? Meron pa yan. Ano pa yung meron kay proline? Other than carboxylic acid. You have your tignan nyo yung atoms. Ayan. Yun. Kita na. Secondary amine. Tignan nyo yung atoms. Pag may nitrogen, ayun. So, it could be an amine. So, this is a secondary amine. Bakit siya secondary? Kasi, it is connected with two carbons. Isa, dalawa. So, connected siya to two carbons. So, this is a secondary amine. So, this is the reason why proline is weird. Because majority of the amino acids are primary amines. Majority of the amino acids are primary amines. However, proline is the only amino acid that is secondary. Okay. Actually, they don't consider it as an amino acid. They called it amino acid. No, amino acid daw siya. Pero syempre, nag-iisa lang naman yan na di isama mo na. Gawin mo ng amino acid. So, yan. So, yun lang yung weird. Anyway, you will learn more of this in biochem. Okay? So, ganun. So, sa primary amine, majority of the amino acids are primary. But for proline, this is the only amino acid that is secondary. Next one, ethyl acetate. Ethyl acetate is an organic solvent we use in extraction. So what is the functional group you can see in ethyl acetate? Anong functional group meron kaya dyan? Yan ay si Aling Ester. Ester. So this is an ester. Why? Ayan, you have your carbonyl, you have the oxygen, and then 'di ba sabi ko kanina, yung oxygen, pwede dalawa kadugtong yan. If hydrogen yan, carboxylic acid. Pero kapag carbon, that's an ester or a carboxylic ester. Ito, carbon yung nakadugtong sa kanya. So, ibig sabihin, this is an ester or a carboxylic ester. Okay? Kapag hydrogen lang yun, carboxylic acid. But this one is just an ester. So, we treat this as one whole thing. Okay? So, yan yung ating ester. Okay? So, yan. Ganun lang. So, that's an ester. So, ang nangyayari, kapag yung ester nasira, it becomes carboxylic acid. That's why, kapag yung pagkain na panis, ang asim. Hindi nyo ba napapansin yan? Bakit? Ano ba meron sa food? Especially sa mga, let's say, mga fats. Yung ating mga fats, no, sa pagkain, they are esters. Pero, when esters break down, they turn into carboxylic acids. So, mapuputol yan. May carboxylic acid yan. That's why, yung panis na pagkain, ang asim. Ang asim niya. 'Di ba? Kaya, yun kasi. When they break down, they form carboxylic acids. So, alam nyo na, kapag panis yung food nyo, alam nyo, ano sasabihin nyo sa magulang nyo? Ay, nag-form na siya ng carboxylic acid. Okay. At least, alam niya, may natutunan kayo, di ba? Ganun lang. So, kaya maasim-asim ang foods, no? Ayan. Next one. This is delta lactam. This is a delta lactam. Anong functional group meron dyan? Isang functional group meron dyan, nakapaikot lang. Isa lang meron dyan. Tignan na maigi yung mga atoms. Don't worry, may practice quiz tayo dito, but next week na lang. Okay? Kasabay ng asynchronous discussion. Okay? So, i-post ko na lang sa Canvas next week. Anong functional group meron dito sa ating delta lactam? Kung nahihirapan, let me begin with the carbonyl. Okay. Pag may nakita kayong carbonyl, start kayo doon. Okay. So, carbonyl. Ano yung kasunod ng carbonyl? Nitrogen. Okay. So, again, ano sabi natin? Kapag may nitrogen nakadugtong si carbonyl, that is an amide. Okay, amide. Yan. Siguro ang tataka kayo, no? Sir, bakit hindi yung carbon dun sa gilid? Kasi, bakit kaya? Ang priority natin is yung heavier element. Okay. So, sino ba mas mabigat? Carbon? Carbon, nitrogen. Sino mas mabigat? Eh di nitrogen, di ba? So, yeah. So, ito yung mas priority natin pag tumitingin tayo. Okay. So, this part is an amide. Okay. So, this is an amide. Okay. So, what type of amide? Primary, secondary, tertiary. Okay. So, paano mo makaklasify yon? Bilangin mo lang yung carbon connected to the nitrogen, including the carbonyl. Okay. So, this is what? A primary, secondary, or a tertiary amide? Okay, so tertiary. Sige, any other? It is? It is secondary. Bakit naging secondary? Kasi tignan nyo, ilang carbon nakadugtong kay nitrogen? Isa. Dalawa. So nitrogen doon nakadugtong isa. Then dalawa. So that's just a secondary. Okay. So this is a secondary amide. Okay. So ganun lang ha. So most likely ganito yung quiz natin. So mapapaisip talaga kayo. Okay. So just look at the molecule very carefully. Kapag tinanong primary, secondary, tertiary, bilangin mo lang ilan yung carbon connected to the nitrogen. So isa, dalawa. So that's secondary. Okay? So ganun lang. Okay, so this is a secondary amide. So that's our delta lactam. Ito, favorite ko, chocolate, theobromine. Although wala siyang bromine, no, it's called the theobromine. And ito yung chocolate. Okay, this is my favorite. So there are several functional groups here. Tatlo. Pero siguro ako na lang yung magsasagot na ito. Sige. Pero sige, isip muna kayo. Ano kaya yon? Ano kaya yung mga functional groups sa theobromine? So may amide ka? Yes, may amide. Naantok ako, sorry guys. So ito, so dalawa yung amide mo, no? Ito, pati ito. So dalawang amide and may amine ka. Basta may nitrogen amine yan. So this is not an amide also. Kasi baka isipin nyo, ano, sir, may C double bond on. Pero carbon yun eh. Pag oxygen yan, amide yan ulit. Pero it's just nitrogen. So this is an amide. This is another amide. This is na just amine. Amine siya kasi wala siyang carbonyl na katabi. Okay? So again, in order for the amine to be an amide, kailangan may katabi siyang carbonyl. So ito, nitrogen, may katabi siyang carbonyl. Nitrogen, may katabing carbonyl. Ito, nitrogen lang. So this is an amide, and amine. Kaya, ang ating chocolate ay bitter. Mapakla siya. unless may asukal, 'di ba? Papansin niyo 'yan. Kapag pure chocolate, alam niyo yung ano, sa probinsya kasi nung buhay pa yung lola ko, 'pag napunta siya ng Maynila, nagdadala siya ng kakao, yung tsokolate. So, 'pag tinikman mo 'yun, ang pait. Parang mapaisip ka, "Ito ba yung chocolate? 'Di ba alam ko yung chocolate matamis, eh." No, but that's really the taste of chocolate. It's bitter. Kasi kapag may mga amin, bitter sila, mapait. Ang palaya, maraming amin 'yan, kaya mapait 'yan. Okay? So, ito, amide, no? Kaya, that's why mapait yung ating um, yan. So, that's why mapait yung ating ano, mga chocolate. Tagal ko nag-isip sa chocolate. So, yan. So, yan. This is an amide, another amide, and just an amine. Okay, amine lang siya kasi siya ay nitrogen lang, wala siyang katabing carbonyl. Okay? So, mapait yan. Okay, so what type of amide kaya? So, ako na lang din siguro. So, lahat sila tertiary. Okay? So, this is a tertiary amide, tertiary amine. Bakit kaya sila tertiary? So, the nitrogen is connected to how many carbons? 1, 2, 3. Tertiary. In terms of this carbon, in terms of this nitrogen, saan siya nakadugtong? 1, 2, 3. So, tatlo din. So, sa tatlo din siya nakadugtong. So, that's tertiary as well. O, ito. Saan siya nakadugtong? Ilang carbons? 1, 2, 3. So, tertiary din. Okay. So, basically, ganyan lang yung mangyayari sa quiz natin. Sa next week pa naman, we still have a topic to cover. Asynchronous na lang yun next week, no? So, basically, ang expect nyo sa quiz, wala nang calculation, no? Laya na kayo dun. Hindi na kayo mahihirapan sa solving. What I just need you to do is to just recognize patterns, no? Don't worry, I will be uploading a practice quiz. If not this weekdays, baka next week na. No? Sa mismong araw ng undas. Anyway, hindi naman kailangan sagutan agad, no? So, ganun lang, no? So, just practice first. Bago kayo mag-practice, kabisaduhin muna. Okay? And then, after that, you can apply your memorized functional groups into different molecules. So, ako, ang pwede nyong gawing drill, mag-google lang kayo, functional groups worksheet, no? Okay, so hanap lang kayo ng mga worksheet about functional groups, no? So, and then, don't worry, magbibigay din naman ako. Okay? So, magbibigay din ako ng practice quiz about this naman. So, don't worry. Okay, so for now, Google muna kayo ng mga molecules, no? Isip kayo ng mga molecules na pwede nyo, maisip. Kunwari, dopamine. Kunwari, dopamine. Ano kaya mga functional groups sa dopamine? Tignan natin. Sorry, this is your dopamine. Ayan, so this is your dopamine. So, ano meron dyan? You have your hydroxyl, which is an alcohol, and an amine. Okay? So, yan. So, ganun lang, no? So, that's how you do it. No? So, just look into many molecules na maisip nyo. Kunwari, serotonin naman. Serotonin. Ayan. Ano kaya mga functional group dito sa serotonin? Tignan natin. So, that's an alcohol and amine. Amine. Primary to. This is secondary. Bakit? Kasi this nitrogen is connected to 1 carbon. This nitrogen is connected to 2 carbons. So, this is secondary, primary. And then you have your alcohol. Okay? So, ganun lang. No? So, for now, Google muna. Pero magbibigay ako ng worksheet in the following days. No? So, yan. That is the introductory part of the org chemistry. Hopefully, you will find the subject easier compared to what we had in the midterm period. No? And kapag nakita nyo kasi to as madali, then magiging madali na lang talaga, no? If you think of Orchem as an easy subject, magiging easy talaga siya for you. Kasi dati, share ko lang, weakness ko to nung college. Kahinaan ko to nung college. Like, although mataas yung grade ko, pero ayoko ng Orchem. Ayoko ng Orchem. Kasi parang nako-confuse ako. So, pero, eventually, no, as I learn more, no, sa habang nagtuturo and my master's class, ayun, madali lang pala, no. So it's just a matter of perspective, no. So if you look at Orchem as a different subject, then mahirapan ka talaga. Okay. Ako kasi I find it very hard dati kasi puro memorization. Okay ako sa math eh. Pero pagdating sa memorization, parang sumasakit ulo ko. Pero hindi naman pala talaga siya just memorize. May logic din, no? So anyway, if you're that kind of person that is more inclined to memorization, then yeah, you will find this subject very easy. Ako kasi math nga eh. And to be honest with you, sa board exam ko, ito yung subject na mababa ako. Okay. Mas mataas pa yung mga math ko. Analytical chem, inorganic chem, physical chem, no? Ayun, line of 8 yon. Pero pagdating dito sa org chem, 75, no? Which is mataas na rin compared to the normal grades in the boards, no? Ang overall grade ko naman ng boards is 80, no? Ang passing naman is 50. So, mataas na mataas yung grade ko. Okay? Pero hindi ako nakapag-top notch kasi masyadong pang mga na yan, gumagano na yung utak na. Ako kasi nung nag-boards ako, I'm just chilling. Normal po ba magka 75 sa final grade sa college? Oo. 50 nga pwede eh. Pwede nga D eh. No, 50 yan. Pero yeah, okay lang 75. Pero of course, may opportunity kayo makabawi. Pwede kayo makabawi. Kasi if you have a good standing on the midterm, just continue it. Pero if you don't have a very high grade on the midterm, use OrgChem as a pambawi. Okay. Kayang-kaya yan. Nakikita ko nga mga posts ngayon sa sa 1FEU. Paramihan daw Nancy. Tapos yung academic integrity day kung ano-ano na yung grades. Ay, seryosohin nyo yan ha. Okay. I think malapit na yung deadline nun or tapos na yung deadline. Pero yun. Anyway, so yun lang. I hope na you are more inclined on memorization because OrgChem's just that. No? Ganun lang siya. Memorize. Logic. Okay? So yan. By the way, next meeting, no, which is asynchronous, magdi-discuss tayo about chirality. We will think of molecules as 3D because of its tetrahedral geometry, as you know. Hopefully, mahanap ko na rin yung aking molecular model para mapakita ko sa inyo yung 3D representation of molecules. Okay? So, but for now, just memorize things. And with that, I will see you again in the next few days. No? Next week, wala muna para makapagpahinga din kayo. Spend your time with the family or just sleep. So asynchronous kasi tayo. So thank you and I hope you learned something today. And again, think of OrgChem as an easy subject because if you think that way, magiging madali na lang talaga siya. Okay? So bye-bye. Enjoy your day and ako matutulog ulit. So see you all next time. Bye-bye. Ingat. Bye po.